Use your aggressive feelings, boy. Let the hate flow through you.
I'll never turn to the dark side.
Sound off like you got a pair. You will be a weapon. You will be a minister of death, praying for war. Because I am hard, you will not like me. But the more you hate me, the more you will learn. I am hard, but I am fair.
That you, John Wayne? Is this me?
And where's my verschlungen pastrami sandwiches?
Blue up there, but no blue, just kind of a tan with occasional clouds floating by. And this is all this Saharan dust. Now, some folks don't feel it, but others do.
You inhale it, they go to work replicating, spreading like a virus, multiplying in exponentials. 6 months' time, I could have 100 million people converted, ditch diggers, porn stars, and presidents. Not one would be the wiser. 100 million people who buy what I want them to buy and vote how I want them to vote. Do pretty much damn well anything I figure they ought to do.
Hold on. Slow down, everybody.
I want to be clear. I'm not going nuts.
The president has a big stick.
We choose truth over facts.
Check my shape on it. Let's do push-ups together, man. Let's run. Let's do whatever you want to do.
One man stands ready to deliver change we desperately need. A man I'm proud to call my friend. A man who will be the next president of the United States, Barack America.
Are you a boy or a girl?
It's a fair question. I'm female.
No kidding.
All woman.
From the get-go? No operation?
From birth, yes.
How you get that close to shave on your face?
I need to go, but I'll be back to,
nice knowing you.
Yeah.
You should be, because whether you're ready or not, it's coming. What you're looking at here are sculptures that originated from ancient Egypt. They're currently being held at the British Museum in London. We see here a human in the center of two Nephilim hybrids, half man, half beast. The symbolism of the beast system always gives it away. In this picture, in these ancient sculptures from Egypt, we find the kneeling, we also find the fist raised. This is evidence of that same spirit that ran ancient Egypt. What we're actually seeing here is that same Antichrist spirit from Egypt manifesting in America. Currently in America, there's a movement where many millions of people are taking a knee. We are also finding movements where there are millions of people in America raising the fist. The narrative that's in place behind these symbolic gestures has nothing to do with the actual spirit that is behind these movements and these symbols. In all nations where communist politicians and insurgents operate, these evil men and women invariably identify themselves by making the sign of the clenched fist. Some biblical authorities say that the clenched fist also represents the rebellious attitude of the people of Babylon towards the Lord God. Dr. Peter Ruckman wrote that you will find this salute being given by all members of the Communist Party in New York in the 1920s and by the Stalinist Abraham Lincoln Brigade during the Civil War in Spain in the 1930s. This salute was adopted by the Black Panthers in America during the 1960s. Liberal Afro-American leaders continue to employ this salute to this day. The clenched fist salute, or hand sign, is also well known in Freemasonry. It's called the first sign or due guard. In the ritual of the Select Master degree is the holding up or raising of both arms in an L or square position with the fists of both hands typically clenched. Richardson's Monitor of Freemasonry states, "The signs of a Select Master are then given as follows: The first is similar to the sign of a master mason. The fists are both clenched in allusion to one of the penalties of the obligation, which is to have both hands chopped off to the stumps. And here we find another interesting symbol that connects Freemasonry with ancient Egypt. A detailed study of ancient Egyptian religious literature provides us with tons of useful information on topics of witchcraft and divine powers. Magic, sorceries, and spells also formed a large part of ancient Egyptian society. It's as I always say, the symbols will tell the rest of the story. There is a language of symbols, ancient, it's been with us since the very beginning. And here we're finding those connections between ancient Egypt, which worshipped the sun god, or Lucifer, openly, and the mass amounts of chaos taking place in our modern day society. All of these people are being controlled by the same Antichrist spirit. And the sad part is, the majority of them have no clue. Anyone who has actually studied Freemasonry, or perhaps been a Freemason themselves, understand the connection between ancient Egypt, the mystery schools, the mystery religions, and modern Freemasonry. The connections here can be very diverse, and the study of this connection between Egypt and Freemasonry can get very deep. It's my opinion, in keeping it simple, that the ultimate connection between modern Freemasonry and ancient Egypt is that worship of the sun god. I also believe that many of these Masons and other secret societies on very high levels are doing the devil's work on this earth. Both the ancient Egyptians and modern Freemasonry at higher levels are working to form that one world order system with a one world leader. This ancient spirit of Egypt manifests in a myriad of ways all around the world. It's not just in America. We can find the same symbolism right here. This is from a nuclear security summit that took place in 2014. Obama was there with leaders from all around the world. And as you can see, they're sitting in a circle. And just inside the circle that they're sitting at, you can see modern-day hieroglyphics all around. And what do we find right in the center? A massive pyramid on top of a sun disk. This is a direct connection back to that system, or that spirit of ancient Egypt, the mystery schools, the mystery religions.
I warn you, Holmes, if you pursue this matter... So, what the...
Forgive the sleight of hand, Sir Charles. In the pursuit of criminals, one learns their devices.
What is this mumbo-jumbo?
The handshake and the ring, Watson, are archaic rituals preserved by the 33rd degree members of the secret order of Freemasons.
Now there's something else I want to show you. What you're looking at is a map of Egypt, and what you see right there in the center is the Nile River. And the Nile River runs the entire length of Egypt. On the east side, it's about 30% of land, and on the west side, about 70%. The Nile River is also called the cradle of civilization.
still in Bern, Switzerland, obelisks. The all-seeing eye. And the famous statue of the Swiss pedophile. They call it the child eater. Well, that's what the Sisters of Isis want. You know, if they can't make a garden gnome out of him, and then they use drugs or the Swiss pedophiles. So this is the famous Swiss pedophiles. The country is well known for pedophiles, as they had children, slaves and all that. Here we can see the joining, the Swiss cross and all that, yeah. Little monkeys. Oh, the bear. So here's still the bear, you know, from the Revelations, the beast. One of the beasts is the bear.
I want to see a Swiss system. I mean, I wouldn't mind being conquered by Switzerland right now.
We go to a map of America, and what do we find in America? The Mississippi River. And the Mississippi River runs the entire length of America. On the east side, about 30% of the land. On the west, about 70% of the land. It's also interesting to note that the Mississippi River is considered the cradle of American civilization. And here's something else to take note of. Looking back at the map of Egypt, looking back at the Nile River, we find a city on the river called Memphis. And of course, in America, we also have a city named Memphis that sits on the Mississippi River. And it just so happens to have a massive pyramid in the city as well. It also has a statue of Ramses the Great in front of the pyramid. Even taking a look at American currency, we notice the two triangles, the pyramid and the capstone above it. The top capstone of the pyramid is not in place, and that's for a reason. It's denoting an unfinished situation. The capstone is detached from the bottom portion. And interestingly, the Great Pyramid of Egypt was never finished. So this unfinished situation was planned to remain in effect until the old world order was destroyed and replaced with a new.
In an appearance on ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live, host Jimmy Kimmel asked the actor and former politician if he thinks Jenner could win.
Anyone has a chance, because I think that the people are dissatisfied with what's going on here in California. And I hope that as many people as possible are jumping into the race.
Schwarzenegger noted when he ran for governor during a recall election, there were 150 candidates. He believes there will be at least 100 candidates this time around.
The key thing about all of this is it doesn't matter if it's Caitlin or if it's anyone else, to have a clear vision of where you want to go, what are the kind of changes you want to make, and why are you qualified to become governor.
The star added he is, quote, very good friends with Jenner, but declined to say if she called him concerning her decision to run.
I have the utmost respect for her, but I'm also very good friends with Governor Newsom, and I'm good friends with all the other people that have contacted me and have asked me for advice.
For more on this story, go to thr.com. For The Hollywood Reporter News, I'm Tiffany.
Chapter 3. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. And the Lord God called unto Adam, and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, Who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? And the man said, The woman whom thou gavest to be with me gave me of the tree, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt...
Two answers before you even get started. I don't know, and if I did, we wouldn't talk about it anyway. Something as simple and innocuous as this becomes a challenge for all of us to maintain accountability and control of our critical infrastructure systems. This actually contains the Stuxnet virus. It's impacting industrial control. Is this something that's coming after the homeland? If you get up in the morning and turn off your alarm and make coffee,
power plants, power grids,
and pump gas,
transportation, telecommunication,
and use the ATM, you've touched industrial control systems. It's what powers our lives.
Most of these systems are relatively easy for a sophisticated hacker to get into.
The security experts who are studying Stuxnet really think it required the resources of a nation state.
It spread to any Windows machine in the entire world.
We didn't know if it was set to turn off all electricity plants around the world, or it would start shutting things down or launching some attack.
It was blowing up centrifuges, and it was leaving no trace.
There have been assassinations of nuclear scientists.
Some human assets had to be involved. Spies.
It went beyond our worst fears, our worst nightmares.
This is not your ordinary criminal doing this. This is someone bigger.
The monster turned against its creators, and now everyone is in this game.
This has the whiff of August 1945. Somebody just used a new weapon, and this weapon will not be put back into the box.
You've been focusing on Stuxnet, but that was just a small part of a much
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by the... So you know the thing. And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
Well, we didn't make it, but we definitely tried.
There is no plan.
I saw your ship blow up. The ship? We would never end the ship. We designed the damn thing, didn't we?
We were hidden in the first booster rocket to separate. Splashed down back in the Atlantic just as planned. We ain't going nowhere.
Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies.
1943, the following directive was issued from party headquarters to all communists in the United States. It read, "When certain obstructionists become too irritating, label them after suitable build-ups as fascist or Nazi or anti-Semitic, and use the prestige of anti-fascist and tolerance organizations to discredit them. In the public mind, constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind."
Radium was the element that was discovered by Madame Curie, and its chemistry is very similar to that of barium, except that it is radioactive.
On the 20th of April 1902, after years of hard work, Marie and Pierre Curie successfully isolated a brand new element, radium. It was thought at the time that this new material might have all kinds of beneficial properties, and so radium was swiftly incorporated into a huge range of products, everything from makeup to ceramics to health tonics and jewellery. What wasn't understood at this time was that radium was, in fact, quite deadly. The popularity of radium shortly after its discovery cannot be overstated. Radiation was something that wasn't well understood at the time, but which had positive associations. It was understood that radiation could be used to kill cancerous cells, but the damaging effects it had on healthy cells weren't fully appreciated. Added to this was the fact that radium glowed, a visible effect that was quite extraordinary at the time, and which led many to believe that it must surely have some almost magical health-giving properties. Picking up on this, quack doctors were quick to promote radium as invigorating and curative. With this incorrect belief firmly entrenched, radium was soon included in everything. You could buy chocolate and other snacks laced with radium, or purchase a radium-coated crock in which to store your drinking water. Radium was added to makeup, to skincare products, to toothpaste and other toiletries. It was available to buy in the form of radium plasters, radium ointment, radium syrup, and even radium suppositories. Medicines that were touted as treating every ailment imaginable. You could even visit radium spas, where you would be exposed to the material in radium-infused baths and saunas. As the world descended into World War I, another use for radium came to the forefront. When infused into paint, it would make that paint glow in the dark. This made it an ideal material for coating watch faces, control panels, and instrument dials. Radium provided much-needed illumination for soldiers in the field, without them having to rely on lamps or other bulky equipment. From 1917, the demand for radium-coated dials skyrocketed, which was good news for the United States Radium Corporation. The company had been in the business of extracting and processing uranium for a few years. Now it expanded to mixing and applying radium-infused paint, a substance which they called undark. With the war effort requiring an extraordinary number of luminous dials, business boomed. Within a year there were facilities in several states, including a plant in Orange, New Jersey, which specialized in the painting of dials. Many local women were pleased to secure a job at this facility. It was considered good work. It was well paid, the conditions were fairly pleasant compared to other jobs, and it was skilled and respectable work. It was well paid, the conditions were fairly pleasant compared to other jobs, and it was skilled and respectable work. On top of all that, of course, it was perceived as not being overly dangerous, certainly when compared to working in a munitions factory. All things considered, it was no surprise that many local people were employed as dial painters. The typical work of a dial painter was simple but painstaking. They would be supplied with radium paint and freshly stamped dials, and had to use paintbrushes to strategically apply radium to the parts of the dial which needed to glow. Precision was required, and so workers were instructed to lick the tips of their brushes in between each application in order to bring the bristles to a fine point. In addition to this, workers were under the impression that working with radium was a perk of the job. The stuff was considered, by the general public at least, to be health-giving rather than dangerous, and indeed, some people paid a lot of money to visit radium spas or purchase radium-infused. The workers at the United States Radium Corporation had access to the stuff for free, and so they used it, painting their teeth and nails to give them a pleasant glow before heading out to dances in the evenings. Years passed. Hundreds of thousands of dials were painted and shipped out. The war ground on, and eventually came to an end, much to the relief of the general population. But all was not well for the ex-workers of the United States Radium Corporation. Slowly, one by one, dial painters were falling ill. As the 1910s became the 1920s, hundreds of women who had worked as dial painters over the last few years started noticing pain in their teeth and jaws. Many were having to visit their dentists on a regular basis, and were losing teeth with each and every visit. They were constantly exhausted and in pain, and in some cases it was found that their jawbones were riddled with holes, reduced to a brittle, hollow honeycomb. When 22-year-old Molly McGeer passed away after years of pain in her jaw and teeth, her condition was written off as syphilis. The complaints of many other women were glossed over with the same explanation, despite symptoms that pointed to something quite different and more sinister. It was 1925 before any of the workers came to understand the devastating effect that the radium had had on their bodies. Grace Fryer had once been a dial painter. Now her body was quite literally falling apart. The bones of her spine crumbled and required a metal brace. Tumours and abscesses sprouted in her jaw, and she was in constant pain. The radium she had ingested while working had riddled her with cancer and weakened her bones. It would soon end her life. Furious, Grace and 4 of her colleagues moved to sue their ex-employer. For 2 years, however, no lawyer would take them seriously, despite their steadily worsening conditions. It was 1928 before the suit was finally filed. By this time, the demand for radium was on the decline, as people woke up to the dangers of radiation. Sales of radium-infused products fell still further when newspapers around the world printed details of Grace's it could to avoid responsibility, including using a range of delaying tactics to draw out the suit in the hope that Grace and her colleagues would die before it could be resolved. At the same time, they quietly issued workers with protective equipment and advised against the practice of licking brushes to point them. It was the very definition of too little, too late.
In the oceans, thousands of bioluminescent marine organisms emit a blue glow onto the night shore as the waves rise and fall. Fireflies flash in the air, producing their own glow. This bioluminescence is necessary for animals to find mates and to protect their species from predators, but it also has the potential to improve current medical practices and even turn people into human glow sticks. By processing magnetic nanoparticles to include the enzymes that produce bioluminescence, we can use the natural light to track the progress of diseased cells throughout the body. In organisms like fireflies and single-celled dinoflagellates in the ocean, bioluminescence is triggered by movement caused by the environment. This agitation deforms the cell membrane and leads to a flow of protons that brings luciferase, an enzyme, in contact with luciferin, a compound. Because the proton flow decreases the pH, luciferase oxidizes the luciferin, and photons are released in a flash of light. In fireflies, adenosine triphosphate in either magnesium or calcium must also be present for light to be produced. Current medical imaging for cancer and other diseases often requires the use of radiology methods such as CT scans, X-rays, and nuclear imaging. Because these techniques can expose patients to large doses of radiation in short amounts of time, there is often a risk of cell growth or even DNA being damaged inside the body. Luciferase, the main chemical responsible for the light produced in some bioluminescent organisms, can likely help provide a safer alternative to these traditional imaging methods. Rather than using an external source for imaging, Luciferase nanoparticles are being researched to be placed in vivo or inside animals to track changes in cell growth with little internal harm. This would otherwise require a more invasive procedure. In the future, this process will ideally be used inside patients' bodies for application in the medical imaging field.
Luciferase-based bioimaging is currently being used in medical research studies to monitor gene expression, infection, tumor growth, transplantation, and gene therapy. The imaging method generally involves tagging cells of interest with particles containing the luciferase protein. These cells are injected into an animal specimen and allowed to propagate, and the luciferin substrate is injected soon after. The luciferin activates the luciferase, and the emitted light can be seen with the highly sensitive charge-coupled device camera, otherwise known as the CCD. The device measures the photoluminescent signal in photons, and overlays the data onto an image. The injection of luciferin and the subsequent imaging processes can be repeated to track the position of the cells over time. To produce the structures that hold and transport the luciferase enzyme used for bioluminescence, iron oxide magnetic nanoparticles, or MNPs, must be synthesized first. To create the MNPs, a solution of ferric and ferrous ions is combined with a base, usually hydroxide. Magnetite then precipitates from this solution. Polymers or organic molecules such as citric acid are also added to prevent excess products from gathering on the surface of the MNPs. The coated MNPs are 40 to 119 nanometer spheres with superparamagnetic behavior, which allows an outside magnetic imaging source to track cells and control the particles. Once the iron oxide MNPs are made, they are incubated with the luciferase enzyme and added onto the organic molecule surface of the MNP. The iron oxide core of the MNP is 17 nanometers in diameter. This small size lends to the particle's superparamagnetic behavior. The core has a cubic spinel structure, with the oxygen atoms arranged in an FCC lattice. The next layer of the particle consists of a substance that stabilizes the molecule. As a result of this coating, the MNPs are more spherical and don't aggregate, which is important for their individual use in binding to cells. The outermost layer of the MNP is the luciferase protein, which binds to the two remaining carboxyl groups on the organic molecule layer. The luciferase acts as a targeting agent, and it can bind easily to mammalian cells because the surfaces of these cells have numerous receptors for the targeting agents. The resulting MNP has an overall diameter from 40 nanometers to 119 nanometers, depending on the type of luciferase and imaging conditions. The nanoscale is necessary for the particles to be able to bind to and track individual cells.
The processing and subsequent structure of the nanoparticles affects specific properties that are useful for medical tracking purposes. Because luciferase is light-emitting, particles can be readily detected and monitored inside the body to track specific cells. The wavelength of light emitted by the particles is around 500 to 600 nanometers, producing blue or green light. At these wavelengths, signals can penetrate tissue to clearly image internal organs. The light is then able to be tracked using a charge-coupled device camera to monitor changes over time. Furthermore, the superparamagnetic property of nanoparticles can allow targeted cells to be manipulated by external magnetic fields, which is similar to some current gene therapy methods. The cells targeted by certain nanoparticles can then be neutralized to lose function or sorted and separated from healthy cells. This can help to address abnormal growth caused by diseases such as cancer. By combining age-old magnetic iron particles with modern bioluminescent applications, the field of bioimaging is taking on a new light. Currently, this technology has proven to be very successful in studies involving animals and is much less toxic when compared to traditional imaging methods. Potential concerns, however, are whether or not this in vivo imaging technique is just as powerful and accurate when compared to current methods, and whether the magnetic cell manipulation is as viable long-term as modern gene therapy techniques. These should be further investigated to determine the extent of the particles' effectiveness. Nevertheless, Looking to the future, the potential for the use of Luciferase-coated magnetic nanoparticles in human bodies is extremely promising. Who knows? We might even be able to glow in the dark someday.